What would you do if a terrified 10-year-old boy handed you a crumpled note with just two chilling words? Help me. Officer Nathan Cole never imagined that moment would unravel a dark network of lies, betrayal, and unimaginable danger hidden in the shadows of Cedarville. Secrets that powerful people would do anything to keep buried, even destroy lives. Before we dive into this gripping story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an update. The air around the grain mill was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the distant rustle of leaves in the wind. Officer Nathan Cole's instincts, honed over years of service, were screaming at him to tread carefully. Malik, the boy who had led him here, moved cautiously toward the rusted side door, his small frame rigid with fear. Nathan scanned the area. The old mill loomed like a forgotten sentinel, its cracked windows and peeling paint blending into the shadows. Yet the signs of recent activity, tire tracks, a faintly disturbed patch of grass near the entrance, hinted at something far more sinister than abandonment. "You've been here before," Nathan said softly, more to himself than to the boy. Malik stopped mid-step, his shoulders tensing at the question. He didn't answer, but his body language told Nathan everything he needed to know. This place held memories, and none of them were good. As they reached the door, Malik hesitated, glancing at Nathan with a mixture of fear and urgency. His small hand hovered over the rusted handle, then pulled back. Nathan stepped forward, gently nudging the boy behind him. "I'll go first," Nathan said, his voice steady but low. He reached for the handle, the cold metal groaning under his grip as he pushed it open. The door creaked, the sound echoing into the darkness beyond. Nathan's flashlight pierced the shadows, revealing a space frozen in decay. Inside, the air was damp and heavy, carrying the smell of rust, mildew, and something more acrid Nathan couldn't place. The beam of light swept across the floor, illuminating scattered debris, broken crates, old tools, and fragments of machinery that had long since lost their purpose. Malik stayed close to Nathan, his breathing shallow and rapid. Nathan's flashlight caught something on the floor, and he crouched for a better look. A set of footprints trailed through the dust, small and recent. His eyes followed the path to a corner of the room where a mattress lay against the wall. It was filthy, its fabric stained and torn, and heavy chains were bolted to its frame. The sight made Nathan's stomach churn. "Is this?" Nathan hesitated, turning to look at Malik. The boy stood frozen, his eyes wide and fixed on the mattress. Nathan stepped closer, noticing how Malik's hands gripped his hoodie so tightly, his knuckles were white. "They hurt people here," Malik whispered, his voice barely audible. The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. Nathan's grip on the flashlight tightened as he took in the rest of the scene. Chains attached to the walls, empty wrappers and bottles strewn about, and fresh scratches on the floor where something heavy had been dragged. Nathan's mind raced. This wasn't just an abandoned mill. It was a crime scene, and it was still active. He reached for his radio, but the static that crackled through the speaker was deafening. The interference only heightened his unease. "Stay close to me," Nathan said, guiding Malik toward a darker corner where they could stay hidden. The boy obeyed without question, his small frame trembling but determined. Suddenly, the faint sound of tires crunching gravel reached Nathan's ears. He froze, motioning for Malik to do the same. The boy's eyes darted to the door they had entered through, and Nathan followed his gaze. Headlights sliced through the darkness, sweeping across the exterior of the mill. "We have to move," Nathan whispered, urgency creeping into his tone. He pulled Malik further into the shadows, crouching behind a stack of rusted barrels. The headlights stopped, and Nathan heard the low rumble of an engine shutting off. Car doors opened, followed by the sound of heavy boots on gravel. Malik clutched Nathan's sleeve, his fingers trembling. Nathan placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder, his focus sharp as he listened to the approaching voices. "Make it quick," a deep voice said, its tone curt and commanding. "Boss wants this place cleared out by morning." Nathan's heart pounded as he peeked through a gap in the barrels. 3 men entered the mill, their figures silhouetted against the faint light spilling in from outside. They moved with purpose, scanning the room and muttering to each other. One of them carried a metal gas can, the smell of fuel wafting through the air. "They're going to burn it," Nathan thought grimly. He turned to Malik, who was watching the men with a mix of fear and recognition. Nathan leaned in close, whispering, "Do you know them?" Malik nodded, his face pale. He pointed subtly toward one of the men, a tall, muscular figure wearing a dark jacket. "That one," he whispered, his voice shaky. He's one of them." Nathan didn't need to ask more. The boy's trembling and the haunted look in his eyes said it all. The man wasn't just familiar. He was a source of Malik's nightmares. Nathan's grip on his holster tightened as he weighed his options. They couldn't stay here, but moving risked exposure. The men began spreading the gasoline, the acrid smell growing stronger as the liquid pooled on the floor. Nathan leaned closer to Malik. "When I say run, you run. Don't stop. Don't look back. Understand?" Malik nodded, his small hand still gripping Nathan's sleeve. The men's voices grew louder as they argued over something. Nathan saw his chance. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small wrench he'd grabbed from the ground earlier. With precision, he tossed it toward the opposite side of the mill. The wrench clattered against a metal pipe, the sound echoing through the space. "What was that?" one of the men barked, turning toward the noise. The distraction worked. As the men moved away, Nathan grabbed Malik's hand and whispered, "Go!" They darted toward the side door, Malik moving faster than Nathan expected for someone so small. The cool night air hit them as they burst outside, but the sound of shouting from behind told Nathan their escape hadn't gone unnoticed. "Keep running," Nathan urged, his voice firm. They disappeared into the woods, the dense trees swallowing them whole. But even as they fled, Nathan knew the danger wasn't far behind. The dense woods loomed ahead, a tangle of shadows and whispers as Nathan and Malik fled the grain mill. Behind them, shouts echoed through the night, growing fainter with each step, but not far enough for comfort. The cold night air burned Nathan's lungs as he kept pace with Malik, whose small frame weaved deftly through the underbrush. "Keep going," Nathan urged, his voice a mixture of urgency and reassurance. His flashlight remained off. The beam would only make them easier to track. Instead, he relied on his instincts, the faint glow of the moon barely piercing the canopy above. Malik stumbled but quickly recovered, his determination outpacing his fear. Nathan reached out, steadying him. "We're okay, kid. Just keep moving," he said, though the tension in his voice betrayed his own unease. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew louder again. Heavy boots crashed against the gravel near the mill's exit. A gruff voice called out, "Spread out! Don't let them get far!" Nathan cursed under his breath. They didn't have much time. He scanned the path ahead, his mind racing through his limited options. The woods were vast, but the men behind them clearly knew the area well. "We're going to take a detour," Nathan whispered, gripping Malik's shoulder gently. "See that ridge up ahead? It's harder to climb, but it'll slow them down too." Malik nodded, his breath shallow and fast. His small hand reached up, gripping Nathan's sleeve for reassurance. Together, they moved toward the incline, navigating the uneven terrain with care. Each step seemed to echo louder than the last in the oppressive silence of the forest. As they climbed, Nathan couldn't help but notice how Malik moved with precision, as if he'd done this before. The boy's small feet avoided the crunch of dried leaves, his steps careful and deliberate. It wasn't the clumsiness of a child playing in the woods. It was the practiced movement of someone who had been running for far too long. "Malik," Nathan said softly as they reached the ridge, his tone careful but probing. "How do you know these woods so well?" Malik didn't respond at first, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. Finally, he muttered, "I used to hide here, when they let me go outside." The words hit Nathan like a punch to the gut. He wanted to ask more, to understand the hell this boy had endured, but the urgency of their situation left no room for reflection. They crested the ridge just as the faint glow of flashlights appeared in the distance below. "Down now," Nathan whispered, pulling Malik to the ground. They crouched behind a fallen tree, its trunk thick with moss and decay. Nathan peered over the edge, his eyes narrowing as he counted the figures below. 3 men moved in a loose formation, their flashlights sweeping the forest floor. The leader, the same tall figure Malik had pointed out earlier, barked orders, his deep voice cutting through the night. "Check every trail. They couldn't have gone far." Nathan's grip tightened on the handle of his holstered firearm. He could take one, maybe two of them, but not without risking Malik's safety. The boy's hand trembled against Nathan's sleeve, but he made no sound. "Good," Nathan whispered. "You're doing great, kid. Just stay quiet a little longer." The men below continued their search, their beams dancing erratically through the trees. Nathan's pulse quickened as one of them began climbing the ridge, the light growing brighter with each step. His mind raced. Fight or flight? Before he could decide, Malik tugged on his arm and pointed to the left. Nathan followed his gesture to see a narrow path obscured by thick underbrush. It wasn't a clean escape, but it was better than nothing. "All right," Nathan whispered. "On my count. 1, 2, go." They moved as silently as possible, the underbrush scratching at their arms and legs as they slipped into the hidden trail. Malik led the way, his small size allowing him to navigate the tight space more easily. Nathan followed close behind, his every sense attuned to the sounds of pursuit. The trail led them deeper into the woods, the trees growing denser and the air colder. Malik paused at a fork in the path, his breathing labored. He looked back at Nathan, his wide eyes seeking direction. Nathan crouched beside him, listening intently. The shouts had grown fainter, but he knew better than to let his guard down. "Left," he decided, his voice low. "It'll take us closer to town." Malik nodded and started down the path, his pace quick but cautious. Nathan stayed close, his hand hovering near his firearm. He knew the men wouldn't give up easily, not after what they'd seen at the mill. The forest began to thin, and the faint outline of rooftops appeared in the distance. Relief washed over Nathan, but it was short-lived. A sharp crack echoed behind them, a broken branch. Someone was still following. Nathan spun, his hand on Malik's shoulder as he pushed him forward. "Run," he said, his voice no longer a whisper. Malik bolted, his small figure disappearing into the shadows ahead. Nathan turned to face their pursuer, his firearm drawn. The flashlight beam found him, and he fired a warning shot into the air. The sound was deafening, shattering the stillness of the woods. The figure hesitated, their beam wavering for a moment before retreating. Nathan didn't wait to see if they would regroup. He turned and sprinted after Malik, his heart pounding as he pushed through the last stretch of trees. The two burst into the outskirts of Cedarville, their breaths ragged and visible in the cold night air. Nathan scanned their surroundings, his adrenaline still surging. Malik collapsed onto a patch of grass, his small chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. "You okay?" Nathan managed between gasps. Malik nodded weakly, his face pale but determined. "I'm fine. They didn't get us." Nathan crouched beside him, his hand resting on the boy's shoulder. "No, they didn't, but this isn't over." The boy looked up at him, his wide eyes filled with both fear and resolve. Nathan met his gaze, a silent promise passing between them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Nathan Cole sat in the cramped confines of Detective Clara Rivera's office, the room dimly lit by the glow of her desk lamp. The tension from their flight through the woods lingered in his mind, but his focus remained sharp. Malik was safe for now, resting in a secure room at the station. His small body was finally still, but Nathan knew the boy's torment was far from over. Clara leaned forward, flipping through the weathered ledger Nathan had retrieved from the mill. Her eyes scanned each page with a mixture of intrigue and disgust. "These codes," she muttered, tracing a line with her finger. "They're methodical, dates, initials, and symbols. Whoever's behind this is organized. This isn't some low-level operation." Nathan nodded, his jaw tight. "Malik said they call themselves the Chain Keepers." He pointed out one of their men at the mill, a tall guy built like a linebacker. The kid's terrified of him. Clara looked up, her brows furrowed. "And he's not wrong to be. This kind of structure doesn't just happen. It takes money, connections, and someone powerful enough to shield it all from scrutiny." Nathan gestured to the ledger. "Then let's start with the money. Those dollar amounts next to the initials aren't pocket change. If we follow the trail, we might get closer to whoever's calling the shots." Clara turned the page and paused, her expression hardening. "Look at this," she said, sliding the ledger toward Nathan. Her finger rested on a familiar date, last month's charity gala hosted by Mayor Walter Greaves. Next to it, a string of numbers that looked suspiciously like an account transaction. "Greaves?" Nathan asked, his voice laced with disbelief. The mayor was a pillar of the community, known for his philanthropic work with at-risk youth. The idea of his involvement was almost unthinkable, but not entirely surprising. "Think about it," Clara said. "What better cover for a network like this than someone who already has access to vulnerable kids? Camps, scholarships, mentorship programs. It's the perfect front." Nathan felt a knot form in his stomach. If he's involved, we're not just dealing with criminals. We're up against the people who are supposed to protect this town. Clara leaned back, her eyes narrowing in thought. "We need more than speculation. We need concrete proof." Before Nathan could respond, a soft knock on the door drew their attention. Malik stood in the doorway, his oversized hoodie hanging loosely from his small frame. His eyes darted between Nathan and Clara, hesitant but determined. I can help," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Nathan stood, motioning for Malik to come in. "You should be resting." "I've rested enough," Malik replied, his tone firmer this time. He glanced at the ledger on Clara's desk. "Those symbols, I've seen them before." Clara exchanged a glance with Nathan before pulling up a chair for Malik. "All right," she said gently. "Tell us what you know." Malik sat down, his small hands gripping the edge of the desk. He pointed to a particular symbol, a triangle with a jagged line through it. "This one. It means they're moving people, kids like me." Nathan clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "And these numbers?" he asked, pointing to a series of dates and amounts. "They're times and places," Malik explained, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "When they take kids, where they keep them, and who pays for them." The room fell silent, the gravity of Malik's revelations sinking in. Nathan placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, his voice gentle but resolute. "You're incredibly brave, Malik. This is going to help us stop them." Malik nodded, his gaze fixed on the ledger. "There's one more thing," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "The people who take us, they wear rings. They all have the same symbol on them." Clara leaned forward, her interest piqued. "Can you draw it?" Malik nodded again, taking the pen Clara offered. His hand shook as he sketched a crude design, a chain link encircling a small jagged star. Nathan stared at the symbol, his gut twisting. It was both simple and sinister, a mark of ownership. Clara studied the sketch. "This could be the key to connecting the dots. If these rings are unique, they might lead us to specific individuals." Nathan nodded, his mind already racing. "We need to start with Greaves. If he's involved, he's our best shot at uncovering the rest of the network." Clara's expression darkened. "He's not just going to let us waltz in and start asking questions. He'll have backup, lawyers, friends in high places." "Then we build our case first," Nathan said firmly. "We follow the money, track the symbols, and connect the dots. When we move, we make it airtight." Clara glanced at Malik, her eyes softening. "And we protect him at all costs." Malik looked up at her, his wide eyes filled with both fear and hope. "They're going to come for me," he said quietly. "They always do." Nathan crouched beside him, his hand resting gently on the boy's shoulder. "Not this time," he said, his voice filled with determination. "Not while I'm here." Clara nodded, her resolve matching Nathan's. "We'll keep you safe, Malik, and we'll make sure they pay for what they've done." As the weight of their mission settled over the room, Nathan felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about solving a case. It was about giving a terrified boy a chance at a normal life. And for Nathan, it was about redemption. The information Malik provided had solidified their focus. Mayor Walter Greaves. His charity gala, scheduled for the upcoming weekend, was the perfect opportunity to gather evidence. Nathan Cole and Detective Clara Rivera worked tirelessly to prepare, analyzing every detail of the ledger and identifying potential accomplices. This operation had to be flawless. There wouldn't be a second chance. As the night of the gala arrived, the grand hall of Cedarville's town center shimmered with lights and elegance. The mayor's influence was evident in every polished surface and ornate decoration. Guests dressed in their finest mingled under the dazzling chandelier, their laughter and clinking glasses masking the undercurrent of corruption Nathan and Clara were determined to expose. Nathan adjusted the earpiece in his ear, his hand casually resting on his hip to ensure his concealed holster remained hidden. Wearing a simple black suit, he blended seamlessly into the crowd as one of the gala's security personnel. Clara, meanwhile, had transformed into an unassuming guest, her emerald dress chosen to catch eyes without arousing suspicion. Malik, safely tucked away in the surveillance van parked a few blocks away, monitored the feed from their hidden cameras. "You're all clear so far," Malik's voice came through Nathan's earpiece, steady but quiet. "But keep an eye on the mayor. He just stepped out of the main hall with a man in a gray suit." "Copy that," Nathan murmured, his eyes scanning the room. He spotted Clara near the buffet table, pretending to examine the appetizers while keeping the exits in her peripheral vision. Nathan signaled her subtly with a tilt of his head. Following Malik's direction, Nathan moved toward the hallway leading out of the main hall. His footsteps were deliberate, quiet, as he rounded the corner just in time to catch a glimpse of Mayor Greaves disappearing into a side room with his companion. The door clicked shut behind them. "Got eyes on the mayor," Nathan whispered into his microphone. "Room on the east side. Clara, hold position." "Understood," Clara replied, her tone calm but tense. "Be careful." Nathan approached the door, his hand hovering near his holster. He pressed his ear against the wood, straining to hear the muffled conversation inside. Fragments of words reached him. "Shipment, timing, and keep quiet." His stomach churned. This was it. Proof that the mayor was directly involved in the Chainkeeper's operation. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small recording device. As he positioned it against the doorframe, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Nathan froze, quickly stepping into the shadows. A woman in a glittering gold gown strolled by, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She paused, looking toward the door, then continued on her way, oblivious to Nathan's presence. "Someone's coming," Malik warned through the earpiece. "2 men, heading your way fast." Nathan swore under his breath, slipping into an alcove just as the door to the room opened. Mayor Greaves and the man in the gray suit stepped out, their expressions tense but composed. They walked briskly down the hall, their voices low but urgent. "Clara," Nathan whispered. "Greaves is on the move, gray suit guys with him. Keep an eye on the exits." "Got it," Clara responded. Nathan waited until the hallway was clear before stepping out. His recording device had captured enough to connect the mayor to the operation, but it wasn't enough to take him down. They needed something bigger, something undeniable. "Malik, can you access the camera feeds in this building?" Nathan asked as he made his way back to the main hall. "Already on it," Malik replied. "There's a private camera system covering the service entrance and storage rooms. I'll send you the feed now." Nathan's phone buzzed as the live feed appeared on the screen. He saw the mayor's gray-suited companion slipping into a storage room near the back of the building. A large crate sat in the corner, its markings partially obscured but unmistakably tied to the Chainkeeper's network. "Clara, we've got a lead," Nathan said. "Meet me near the service entrance." "I'm on my way," Clara replied. Nathan reached the storage room just as Clara arrived, her dress now slightly wrinkled from her careful maneuvering through the crowd. Together they pushed open the door, their flashlights illuminating the room. The crate stood ominously in the corner, its lid slightly ajar. Nathan pried it open, revealing a collection of small, leather-bound ledgers identical to the one they'd found at the mill. Each ledger contained more names, dates, and transactions, all meticulously recorded. "This is it," Clara whispered, her voice trembling with both anger and determination. "This is the proof we need." Suddenly, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both freeze. Clara quickly tucked one of the ledgers into her bag while Nathan drew his weapon, motioning for her to move back. The door swung open, revealing one of the mayor's guards. "What are you doing here?" the man demanded, his hand moving toward his sidearm. "Official business," Nathan said calmly, flashing his badge. "Step back." The guard hesitated, his eyes narrowing. Before he could react, Clara pressed a button on her phone, sending an alert to the local precinct. The guard noticed the movement and lunged, but Nathan was faster, disarming him with practiced precision. As the guard stumbled back, Clara stepped forward, her voice steady and sharp. "We're taking this evidence, and you're not stopping us." The sound of sirens in the distance sent the guard into retreat. Nathan and Clara exchanged a glance. the weight of their discovery pressing heavily on them. They had the evidence they needed, but it was only the beginning. The evidence Nathan and Clara had recovered from the gala was damning, but it came with a cost. As they sat in the precinct conference room reviewing the ledgers under the flickering fluorescent lights, the weight of their discovery bore down on them. The chain keepers were larger than they had imagined, an intricate network of money, influence, and fear. And now, Nathan and Clara were in their crosshairs. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his hand rubbing his temple as he stared at the list of names. "This isn't just local," he said. "These connections go far beyond Cedarville. If we're not careful, we'll end up stepping on the wrong toes." Clara nodded, her lips pressed into a tight line. "The mayor won't go down quietly. He'll use every resource he has to bury this." The tension between them was palpable. Malik sat in the corner of the room, his hoodie pulled tight around him. His eyes flicked between Nathan and Clara, wary and uncertain. "You don't trust me anymore," Malik said suddenly, his voice cutting through the heavy silence. Both officers turned to look at him. Nathan frowned. "What are you talking about?" "You didn't tell me what you found at the gala," Malik continued, his voice trembling. "You think I'll mess it up or tell someone, but I'm the one who got you here." Nathan sighed, standing and walking toward the boy. He crouched to meet Malik's eye level, his voice soft but firm. "It's not about trust, Malik. It's about keeping you safe. What we found, it's dangerous. The less you know, the safer you are." Malik pulled his knees up to his chest, his expression torn. "Safe? I've never been safe. Not with them and not now. They're going to come for me no matter what." Clara interjected, her tone measured but tense. "He's not wrong, Nathan. If the chain keepers know he's helping us, they won't stop until they silence him." Nathan straightened, his jaw tightening. "Then we need to move faster. If we can expose Greaves publicly, they'll lose their protection." Clara shook her head. "That's easier said than done. His connections run deep. We don't even know how many people in this precinct are on his payroll." The room fell silent again, the enormity of the situation pressing down on them. Malik broke the tension with a question that sent a chill through Nathan's spine. "Do you think they'll kill us?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Nathan exchanged a glance with Clara before answering. "Not if we stop them first." Before they could continue, the door to the conference room swung open, and Captain Reynolds stepped in. His face was grim, his tone sharper than usual. "We've got a problem. Harper just pulled surveillance logs from the gala. He's asking questions." Nathan's stomach sank. Detective Harper had been acting suspicious for weeks, and now it was clear he was more involved than he'd let on. "What did he see?" Nathan asked. Reynolds folded his arms. "Enough to know you two were there. He's already spinning it like you're interfering with official investigations." Clara groaned, running a hand through her hair. "Great. Just what we needed." Nathan nodded, his mind racing. Harper's involvement was no longer a question. It was a certainty. He was working with the chain keepers, and now their entire operation was at risk. "Let him dig," Nathan said, his voice low but determined. "The more he snoops, the more we'll learn about his connections. But we can't let him find Malik." Clara agreed. "We'll need to keep Malik out of sight and limit our movements. If Harper's watching us, we can't afford any mistakes." Malik stood, his small frame rigid with tension. "I'm not going to hide forever. If you think I'm going to sit here while you figure this out, you don't understand." Nathan placed a firm hand on Malik's shoulder. "We're doing this to protect you. But you're right. We need your help to take them down. Stay with Clara and keep going through those ledgers. I'll deal with Harper." As Nathan left the room, his thoughts were clouded with frustration and resolve. The cracks within their team were growing, but the fight wasn't over. He had one chance to outmaneuver Harper and keep Malik safe. Back in the conference room, Clara turned to Malik. "You really are brave, you know that?" Malik didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared at the ledger in front of him, his eyes hardening with determination. "I just want them to pay for what they've done." Clara nodded, her voice steady. "And they will, but we need to play this smart." The room fell silent again. But this time, the tension was replaced with a sense of unity. They were outnumbered and outmatched. But they weren't giving up. Nathan Cole sat in his unmarked car, parked discreetly across the street from Jimmy's diner. The neon sign buzzed faintly, casting a flickering red glow onto the damp pavement. The diner was a local staple, open 24 hours, frequented by truckers, night owls, and apparently key players in the Chainkeepers network. According to Malik, Jimmy's was more than just a greasy spoon. It was a hub where lower-tier operatives gathered to exchange information and plan their next moves. Inside, Clara Rivera sat at the counter, nursing a cup of coffee and flipping absent-mindedly through a local newspaper. Her emerald scarf and casual jacket made her look like just another diner regular. A tiny camera disguised as a button on her coat transmitted live footage back to Nathan, who monitored the feed on his laptop. "Any movement yet?" Clara's voice came through Nathan's earpiece, calm but laced with tension. "Not yet," Nathan replied. "Malik said the guy we're looking for always shows up after midnight. Keep an eye out for anyone acting too comfortable." Clara smirked faintly, glancing around the room. The diner was sparsely populated, just a couple of late-night patrons and a bored-looking waitress leaning against the counter. The door chimed as a new customer entered, a wiry man in a dark hoodie. He moved quickly to a booth in the corner, glancing around before sitting. "Got something," Clara whispered, lowering her voice. "Far corner dark hoodie. He's watching everyone who comes in." Nathan zoomed in on the feed. The man sat stiffly, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. A few moments later, another figure entered, a stocky man with a thick beard and a leather jacket. He walked directly to the booth, sliding in across from the first man. "That's him," Nathan muttered. "Malik said the guy in the leather jacket is a recruiter, goes by Mickey." Clara folded her newspaper and casually turned to face the counter, angling her coat camera toward the booth. "They're talking," she said. "I can't make out what they're saying, but it looks serious." Nathan enhanced the audio feed from the diner, straining to hear the conversation over the clatter of dishes and the hum of the jukebox. Mickey leaned forward, his voice low and gravelly. "Shipment's delayed," Mickey said. "Too much heat after that gala mess. Boss says we keep everything low-key for now." The man in the hoodie frowned. "You think the cops are onto us?" Mickey chuckled darkly. "Not a chance. Greaves has everything under control. But we've got to be careful. There's a kid who knows too much, and the boss wants him gone." Nathan's grip tightened on the steering wheel, his heart pounding. Malik was in more danger than they'd thought. He activated his microphone to warn Clara. "Don't blow your cover, but we need to know where they're meeting next." Clara nodded subtly, signaling her understanding. She picked up her coffee cup and walked toward the jukebox, positioning herself closer to the booth. The sound of quarters clinking into the machine masked her movements as she adjusted her coat camera for a better angle. Mickey glanced toward the jukebox, but quickly returned his focus to his companion. "Meeting still on at the warehouse," he said. "Mason Street, same time as always. Don't screw this up, or you'll be the next problem we clean up." Nathan immediately searched his mental map of Cedarville. Mason Street was a semi-industrial area filled with abandoned buildings. It was the perfect location for a covert operation, and likely where the Chainkeepers were storing their next shipment. "Got it," Nathan said into the mic. "Clara, finish up and head out. We'll regroup at the station." Clara walked back to the counter, dropping a few bills for her coffee before slipping out of the diner. Nathan's car engine rumbled to life as he followed her discreetly down the street, his mind racing with plans. They had the location of the next meeting, but if they moved too soon, they'd risk losing everything. Back at the station, Clara reviewed the footage with Nathan and Malik. The boy's face paled as he listened to Mickey's conversation. "Mason Street," Malik said, his voice trembling. "That's where they used to keep us before they'd move us. It's bad." Nathan crouched next to Malik, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We're going to stop them, Malik. You're safe with us." Clara folded her arms, her expression grim. "If we're going to hit that warehouse, we'll need backup. And we'll need it fast." Nathan nodded, his resolve hardening. "We'll take them down, every last one of them." The plan was set. Nathan and Clara had spent the better part of the day coordinating with Captain Reynolds and a trusted team of officers. Malik's information and the intel gathered from Mickey's diner meeting gave them a clear target, the warehouse on Mason Street. But as the clock ticked toward midnight, the gravity of the situation settled heavily over the group. This raid wasn't just about gathering evidence. It was about dismantling a network that had operated in the shadows for years. Nathan stood outside the station, adjusting his tactical vest. The brisk night air bit at his face, but the cold did little to quell the fire burning inside him. Clara approached, her expression steely as she handed him a radio. "Backup's en route," she said, "but we're the first wave. If we don't secure the perimeter before they arrive, this whole operation could fall apart." Nathan nodded, slipping the radio into place. "We'll make it work." As they approached the warehouse, the streets were eerily quiet. The industrial area was a maze of cracked asphalt and looming buildings, their facades worn and forgotten. The warehouse itself stood at the end of the street, its windows dark but not lifeless. Through the gaps in the boarded entrances, faint movements hinted at activity inside. Nathan signaled to the team, his hand slicing through the air to direct them into position. Two officers moved toward the side entrances, while Nathan, Clara, and Reynolds approached the main doors. Malik's voice crackled softly in Nathan's earpiece, speaking from the safety of the surveillance van parked several blocks away. "They've got cameras," Malik said, his voice steady despite the tension. "I'm looping the feed now, but you'll need to move fast." "Understood," Nathan whispered, his voice low. "Stay with me, kid." Reynolds gave the signal, and Clara stepped forward with a crowbar, prying the door open just enough for them to slip inside. The air was thick with dust and the acrid smell of gasoline. The warehouse was cavernous, its shadows stretching long and deep. Stacks of crates lined the walls, and makeshift tables were scattered throughout the space, covered in ledgers, cash, and what appeared to be shipping manifests. "Clear the area quietly," Nathan instructed through the radio. "We need to find out what they're moving and where it's going." The team fanned out, their footsteps silent on the concrete floor. Nathan moved toward the center of the warehouse, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. He paused as the beam landed on a cluster of crates, marked with the same symbol Malik had described, a chain encircling a star. He pried one open, revealing rows of sealed packages. Inside were forged documents, cash, and what looked like coded instructions. Clara's voice came through his earpiece. "I've got something, west corner, it looks like a holding area." Nathan turned, moving quickly toward her location. As he approached, his stomach turned at the sight. A row of mattresses bolted to the floor, each one accompanied by heavy chains and filthy blankets. The sight of it was almost too much to bear. "They were here," Clara said softly, her voice shaking. Malik wasn't lying. Before Nathan could respond, the sound of voices echoed from the far side of the warehouse. He raised his fist, signaling the team to freeze. Peering through the shadows, he saw Mickey and two other men entering through a side door, their arms laden with bags. Mickey dropped his load onto a table, pulling out a tablet and scrolling through its contents. "We're out of time," Nathan whispered into his radio. "Move in, now." The team sprang into action, converging on the men with precision. "Cedarville PD," Nathan shouted, his voice commanding as he aimed his weapon. "Hands in the air, don't move." Mickey froze, his eyes narrowing as he slowly raised his hands. The other two men hesitated, but the sight of multiple weapons trained on them left them no choice. As the officers moved to cuff them, Mickey smirked. "You have no idea what you're getting into," he sneered. "This goes way beyond your little town." Nathan ignored him, keeping his focus on the task at hand. Clara began securing the evidence, snapping photos of the crates and ledgers while other officers searched the rest of the warehouse. The tension was palpable, every shadow a potential threat. "Cole," Reynolds called from across the room. "You need to see this." Nathan approached, his heart sinking as he saw what Reynolds had found, a hidden passage leading to a lower level. The air grew colder as they descended, their flashlights revealing another room filled with crates and equipment. At the far end, a set of monitors displayed live feeds from various locations around Cedarville. "They've been watching us," Clara said, her voice tight with anger. Nathan's jaw clenched. "They've got eyes everywhere. No wonder they've stayed ahead of us." Suddenly, Malik's voice came through the earpiece, panicked. "Nathan, You've got more company. 3 SUVs just pulled up outside. They're armed. Nathan's pulse quickened. Hold your positions, he commanded. Reynolds, secure the exits. Clara, stay on the evidence. No one gets in or out. The sound of engines and heavy footsteps grew louder. Nathan moved toward the main entrance, his weapon drawn, ready for the confrontation that was about to unfold. The warehouse was a frenzy of activity. Officers secured the captured suspects, loaded evidence into marked vehicles, and swept the premises for hidden compartments. Outside, tension reached a boiling point as the SUVs Malik had warned about screeched to a halt, spilling armed men into the lot. Nathan Cole stood at the warehouse entrance, his weapon drawn and pointed at the approaching figures. His voice was calm but commanding. Cedarville PD, drop your weapons and get on the ground. The men hesitated, their faces masked by shadows and their movements calculated. One of them, a tall figure with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. You don't know who you're dealing with, he said, his tone a mix of warning and arrogance. Nathan tightened his grip on his firearm, his eyes scanning for any sudden movements. Try me. Suddenly, the air crackled with the unmistakable sound of backup sirens. Flashing lights cut through the darkness as additional patrol cars and tactical units swarmed the scene. The newcomers quickly formed a perimeter, their rifles trained on the SUVs. The men exchanged glances, realizing their advantage had evaporated. Slowly, they dropped their weapons and raised their hands. Nathan exhaled, signaling his team to move in and secure the suspects. Inside the warehouse, Clara Rivera worked furiously to catalog the evidence. Her phone buzzed with an incoming message from Captain Reynolds. We're clear outside, she muttered to herself, relief washing over her momentarily. But as she turned her attention back to the crates, her gaze landed on a small nondescript folder tucked beneath a ledger. She flipped it open, her eyes widening at the contents. Nathan, she called out over her radio, you need to see this. Nathan entered the warehouse moments later, his boots crunching against the concrete floor. Clara handed him the folder, her expression grim. Inside were documents connecting Mayor Greaves to offshore accounts linked to the chainkeepers. The trail of money was undeniable, bribes, payments, and even funding for events designed to mask the organization's activities. This is it, Nathan said, his voice low but resolute. This ties Greaves directly to the operation. Clara nodded. But it's not enough. He'll deny everything, say he was duped or misled. We need something stronger. Nathan's jaw clenched as he thought of Malik. The boy's testimony, combined with the evidence, could be the nail in the coffin. But asking Malik to relive his trauma would come at a cost. Nathan's protective instincts warred with his need for justice. I'll talk to him, Nathan said finally, but only if he's ready. At the station, Malik sat in the small break room, his fingers nervously tapping the edge of the table. He looked up as Nathan entered, his expression guarded. Did you get them? He asked. We got some of them, Nathan replied, sitting across from the boy. But we need your help to finish this. Malik's eyes widened slightly, fear flickering across his face. What do you mean? Nathan placed the folder on the table, flipping it open to show the documents. These tie Greaves to the chainkeepers, but he's going to fight this with everything he has. Your story, what you've seen and what you know, could be what finally takes him down. Malik's fingers tightened on the table edge. You want me to talk in court? Nathan's voice softened. Not unless you're ready. But you're the only one who can connect all the dots. Without you, he might walk away. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Malik took a deep breath, his small shoulders rising and falling. If it means they can't hurt anyone else, I'll do it. Nathan nodded, pride swelling in his chest. You're braver than most adults I know, Malik. The next day, Nathan, Clara, and Malik sat in a packed courtroom. Mayor Greaves sat at the defense table, his polished appearance a stark contrast to the mounting evidence against him. As Malik took the stand, the room fell silent. The boy's voice wavered at first, but as he recounted his experiences, his words grew steadier. He described the symbols, the chains, and the faces of those who had exploited him and others like him. His testimony was raw and haunting, painting a vivid picture of the horrors hidden beneath Cedarville's surface. When Malik finished, the courtroom was silent. Greaves' attorney attempted to discredit him, but the evidence was overwhelming. The documents Clara had uncovered, combined with Malik's testimony, left no room for doubt. By the end of the day, Mayor Greaves was in handcuffs, led out of the courtroom under the watchful eyes of the press. Nathan and Clara stood with Malik outside, the boy's small frame dwarfed by the reporters clamoring for a statement. "You did it, Malik," Nathan said, kneeling beside him. "You were the voice they couldn't silence." Malik's lips quirked into a faint smile. "We did it." Nathan placed a hand on Malik's shoulder, his heart swelling with pride and relief. For the first time in what felt like forever, Cedarville had hope. The victory in court against Mayor Greaves was a critical milestone, but Nathan and Clara knew the Chainkeepers network was far from dismantled. The documents from the warehouse hinted at a larger operation, one centered around a location simply labeled the facility. It wasn't in Cedarville, but somewhere deeper in the woods outside the town, a place intentionally hidden from prying eyes. Nathan and Clara had one goal: find it and shut it down for good. Malik, despite his exhaustion from the trial, insisted on helping. "I've been there," he said, his voice steady. "I know the way." Nathan hesitated, but eventually relented. The boy's knowledge of the Chainkeepers' movements had been invaluable so far, but this was different. A direct confrontation with the heart of their operation. It would be dangerous. The team set out at dusk, their convoy of unmarked vehicles rumbling along narrow back roads. The forest grew denser as they traveled, the trees forming a canopy that blocked out the last light of the setting sun. Malik sat in the passenger seat of Nathan's car, his hands clutching a map marked with the route to the facility. His breaths were shallow, and his gaze flicked nervously between the map and the darkened road ahead. "It's past the old quarry," Malik said quietly, pointing to a turnoff barely visible through the overgrowth. "They don't use roads anymore. They hide the tracks." Nathan nodded, steering the car onto the dirt path. The tires crunched over twigs and gravel as the convoy followed. "Stay close," he radioed to Clara, who was driving the second car. "We'll need all hands on deck once we get there." After another mile, they stopped at a clearing. The rest of the journey would have to be on foot. Nathan handed Malik a flashlight and crouched beside him. "You don't have to go any further," he said. "You've done enough." Malik shook his head, his jaw set with determination. "If I don't help now, they'll just start again somewhere else." Nathan sighed, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "All right, but stay close to me." The group moved silently through the forest, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Malik led the way, his small frame weaving confidently through the trees. After nearly an hour, the faint glow of artificial lights appeared in the distance, partially obscured by the dense foliage. "That's it," Malik whispered, his voice trembling. "That's the place." Nathan peered through the underbrush, his stomach tightening at the sight. The facility was larger than he'd expected, an industrial compound surrounded by a high chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Guard towers stood at each corner, their searchlights sweeping the perimeter. "This isn't just a hideout," Clara muttered, crouching beside him. "This is a fortress." Nathan radioed the rest of the team. "We've got eyes on the facility. Maintain radio silence until I give the signal." As they moved closer, Malik pointed out a narrow drainage tunnel running beneath the fence. "They use that to bring in supplies. It's not guarded." Nathan examined the tunnel, nodding. "Good work, Malik. Clara, you're with me. Reynolds, take the rest of the team and secure the perimeter." The tunnel was cramped and damp, the air thick with the smell of mildew. Nathan and Clara crawled through, emerging on the other side just as the searchlights swept past. They moved quickly, staying low and using the shadows to their advantage. Inside the compound, the facility buzzed with activity. Men in uniforms moved crates from trucks into a large central building. Nathan's heart pounded as he spotted the symbol of the Chainkeepers emblazoned on the crates. Clara pointed to a side entrance. "That's our way in." They slipped through the door, finding themselves in a dimly lit corridor. The walls were lined with locked doors, each labeled with a number. Faint noises, cries, whispers, and the clinking of chains echoed through the hall. "This is where they keep them," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's stomach churned. "Let's find the control room. If we can disable their systems, we'll have a better shot at getting everyone out. They followed the sound of machinery to a room filled with monitors and computers. Clara immediately set to work, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she hacked into the system. Nathan kept watch, his weapon drawn. "Got it," Clara said after a tense few minutes. "Doors are unlocked and the cameras are looping." Nathan radioed the team. "Go, go, go. Secure the facility and evacuate everyone you find." The next hour was chaos. Officers stormed the building, freeing captives and detaining the guards. Nathan and Clara worked tirelessly, leading groups of frightened children and adults to safety. Malik stayed close, guiding them through the compound with a confidence that belied his age. By the time the facility was secured, the sun was beginning to rise. Nathan stood outside watching as ambulances and support vehicles arrived. Clara joined him, her face streaked with dirt but filled with satisfaction. "We did it," she said. Nathan nodded, his gaze shifting to Malik, who was helping a younger boy into an ambulance. "No," he replied. "He did." As the first rays of dawn pierced the canopy above the hidden facility, the air was thick with urgency and relief. The raid had been a success. Dozens of captives freed, key members of the Chainkeepers apprehended, and critical evidence secured. But Nathan Cole knew the fight wasn't over. This wasn't just about dismantling a single operation. It was about ending the Chainkeepers network for good. The rescued captives were being triaged by paramedics, while Clara Rivera coordinated with federal agents who had arrived to take over the investigation. Nathan stood near the facility's main entrance, his gaze fixed on the horizon. His thoughts were on the documents they'd recovered, encrypted files that promised to reveal the full extent of the organization's operations. Malik approached, his face drawn with exhaustion but his eyes resolute. "There's more, isn't there?" he asked. "This wasn't all of them." Nathan knelt to meet Malik's eye level. "No," he admitted, "but this was a major blow. With the evidence we've collected, we can take down the rest of the network." Malik looked down, his hands tightening into fists. "They'll just rebuild. They always do." Nathan placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Not this time. We'll make sure of it." Clara joined them, holding a tablet displaying some of the decrypted files. "We've got names, locations, even financial records," she said. "This connects them to operations in multiple states. The FBI's going to take over, but we've got enough to start making arrests." Nathan scanned the list, recognizing several high-profile names. "These are people in positions of power, politicians, business owners, even law enforcement. No wonder they've been so hard to catch." "Hard to catch, but not impossible," Clara replied. "We've got momentum now. We just need to keep pushing." As they spoke, Captain Reynolds approached, his expression grim. "We've got a problem. Some of the guards we captured are refusing to talk, but a few hinted at a contingency plan, something the Chainkeepers have in place if their operations are compromised." Nathan's stomach tightened. "What kind of plan?" Reynolds shook his head. "They wouldn't say, but it's clear they were ready for something like this. We need to be prepared for retaliation." The weight of the situation settled over the group. Nathan turned to Malik, his voice firm. "You've done more than anyone could have asked, Malik, but it's time for you to step back. You've given us everything we need to take this further." Malik's eyes flashed with defiance. "I'm not stepping back. I've come this far, and I'm not stopping until they're all gone." Clara knelt beside Malik, her voice softer. "We're not asking you to give up. We're asking you to trust us to finish the job. You've done more than enough, Malik. You deserve to be safe." The boy hesitated, his resolve wavering. Finally he nodded, though his expression remained conflicted. "Just promise me you'll stop them." Nathan and Clara exchanged a glance before Nathan replied, "We promise." Over the next 2 days, the evidence from the raid was used to execute a series of coordinated arrests. News outlets were flooded with reports of the Chainkeepers' downfall, their leaders exposed and taken into custody. The people of Cedarville, once blind to the horrors hidden in their town, began to rally behind the survivors, offering support and demanding justice. Despite the progress, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that their victory was incomplete. As he and Clara sifted through the last of the decrypted files, they found references to a hidden vault, an archive containing the full records of the Chainkeeper's activities. Its location was unknown, but its existence was undeniable. This vault could be the key to dismantling the entire network, Clara said. If we can find it, there won't be anywhere left for them to hide. Nathan nodded. Then we find it, no matter what it takes. Later that evening, Nathan visited Malik, who had been placed in protective custody. The boy was sitting by a window staring out at the darkening sky. Nathan joined him, the quiet between them heavy with unspoken thoughts. They'll try to rebuild, Malik said after a while, his voice barely above a whisper. They might try, Nathan replied, but they won't succeed, not with everything we've uncovered. Malik turned to him, his eyes searching. Do you really think it's over? Nathan's expression softened. No, but it's the beginning of the end, and that's because of you. For the first time in days, a small smile flickered across Malik's face. Then don't stop. Nathan nodded. We won't. The revelation of the hidden vault had invigorated Nathan and Clara's mission, but it also reminded Malik of the one piece of his life that still felt irreparably shattered, his mother. As the days passed and more arrests were made, Malik's mind drifted back to the night she disappeared, her desperate screams haunting his dreams. Nathan noticed the boy's growing withdrawal. He found Malik sitting alone in the precinct's quiet room, staring blankly at the pages of a book he wasn't reading. Nathan sat down beside him, the chair creaking under his weight. You've been quiet, Nathan said gently. Malik didn't look up. What's the point of any of this if I never find her? Nathan's heart ached at the raw pain in the boy's voice. We haven't stopped looking, Malik. She's still out there, and we're going to bring her home. Malik turned to Nathan, his eyes glassy with tears. You don't know that. Nathan leaned forward, his voice firm but kind. I know this. Your mom loves you. She fought to protect you that night. And I don't believe for a second that she gave up. She's out there, waiting for us to find her. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with hope and doubt. Malik finally nodded, his fingers curling tightly around the book in his lap. Promise me you won't stop looking. I promise, Nathan said, his voice unwavering. The next morning, Clara burst into the office, her face lit with determination. We got a lead, she said, holding up a report. One of the suspects we arrested at the facility finally cracked. They said the Chainkeepers kept certain valuable assets in a separate location. Nathan's brow furrowed. Assets? Are they talking about people? Clara nodded grimly. It's possible. The location matches a property on the outskirts of a nearby town. It's secluded off the grid and heavily guarded. Nathan's mind raced. If they moved Malik's mom, she could be there. Malik overheard from the doorway, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and anticipation. You're going to check it out, right? He asked. Nathan stood, resting a hand on Malik's shoulder. We're going. Stay here with Captain Reynolds. We'll bring her back. The drive to the property was tense. Nathan and Clara reviewed the details of the layout, preparing for every possible scenario. The property was an abandoned farm, its overgrown fields stretching into the horizon. As they approached, they spotted the faint glimmer of movement, guards patrolling the perimeter. This is it, Clara said, pulling the car to a stop a safe distance away. Nathan radioed for backup, but they couldn't wait. Every moment counted. With weapons drawn, they moved stealthily through the tall grass, circling to the rear of the farmhouse. The air was thick with the scent of earth and decay, the stillness broken only by the distant hum of insects. Inside, the farmhouse was dark and decrepit, but faint noises drew them toward the basement. Nathan led the way, his flashlight slicing through the darkness. As they descended the narrow staircase, a faint voice reached their ears, a woman's voice, hoarse but unmistakably calling for help. Clara, Nathan whispered, motioning toward a locked door at the end of the hall. Clara picked the lock quickly, her hands steady despite the tension. The door creaked open to reveal a small room lit by a single bulb. A woman sat against the wall, her wrists bound and her face pale but fierce. Nathan's breath caught. Malik's mom, he said softly. The woman looked up, her eyes widening with hope. Malik, she whispered. Clara knelt beside her, cutting the bindings. He's safe, she said gently. He's been waiting for you. Tears streamed down the woman's face as she clutched Clara's hand. I thought I'd never see him again. Nathan helped her to her feet, his voice firm. We need to move. Can you walk? She nodded, her determination outweighing her exhaustion. They led her out of the farmhouse, keeping low until they reached the safety of their vehicle. Nathan radioed for medics as they sped away, leaving the dark farmhouse behind. Back at the station, Malik stood as they entered, his eyes locking on his mother's. Mom, he whispered, his voice trembling. She rushed to him, dropping to her knees and wrapping him in a fierce embrace. My baby, she sobbed. I never stopped hoping. Malik clung to her, his tears soaking into her shoulder. I missed you so much. Nathan and Clara watched from a distance, their hearts swelling at the reunion. For all the horrors they'd witnessed, this moment was a reminder of why they fought so hard. The reunion between Malik and his mother had brought an air of hope to the precinct, a moment of light after so many dark days. Nathan and Clara stood quietly in the hallway, giving them space but unable to keep their emotions entirely hidden. Sometimes, Clara said softly, we forget what this fight is about. Moments like these make it worth it. Nathan nodded, his gaze fixed on Malik, who was now laughing through his tears as his mother cradled him in her arms. This is why we can't stop, Nathan replied, for every Malik and every mother out there who's still waiting. The next few days brought sweeping changes to Cedarville. With the Chain Keepers' operations exposed, law enforcement agencies across the region moved quickly, dismantling related cells and bringing complicit individuals to justice. The facility raid and the evidence it uncovered had set off a domino effect that reverberated far beyond the small town. Nathan worked tirelessly, ensuring every piece of evidence was properly handled and every lead was followed. But amid the chaos, he also found time to check on Malik and his mother, who were now staying in a secure location. The boy's resilience never ceased to amaze him. During one visit, Malik handed Nathan a drawing. It was a simple sketch of a chain breaking apart, with a sun rising in the background. You helped me break free, Malik said quietly. Now I want to help others. Nathan took the drawing, his throat tight. You already are, he said. Clara joined Nathan in his office later that evening, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. She placed one on his desk and sank into the chair across from him. You look like you haven't slept in a week. Feels like I haven't, Nathan replied with a faint smile. But it's worth it. Clara sipped her coffee, her eyes thoughtful. You think it's over? Nathan leaned back in his chair, letting out a long breath. The Chain Keepers might be down, but they're not out. There's always another fight. Clara smirked. Well, at least we've got a hell of a team. Nathan chuckled, lifting his mug in a mock toast. To the team. In the weeks that followed, Cedarville began to heal. The community rallied around the survivors, offering support and resources to help them rebuild their lives. Malik and his mother became symbols of hope, their story inspiring others to speak out and seek justice. One bright morning, Nathan found Malik waiting for him at the precinct, a small backpack slung over his shoulder. I want to help, Malik said simply. Nathan crouched to meet the boy's gaze. You already have, Malik. You've done more than anyone could have asked. Malik shook his head, his determination shining through. But there are still people out there who need help. I want to be like you. Nathan's heart swelled with pride. Then we'll make sure you're ready. As the sun rose higher, casting warm light over the precinct, Nathan realized something profound. For all the darkness they had faced, there was a new beginning on the horizon. Not just for Malik, but for Cedarville. And for every life they had touched.